Hello everybody, I'm glad to greet you at our lesson. Our learning objectives for today are the following. To use a growing range of vocabulary which is appropriate to topic in general and which is spelled accurately. The second aim is to skim a range of lengthy text with speed to identify content on a range of curricula and general topics. By the end of the lesson, learners will be able to identify the necessary information in the text and to use appropriate vocabulary to talk about the topic. Today, we are going to write an article about a famous person. How to write an article? There are several writing tips on writing an article about a famous person. An article about a famous person is a formal piece of writing that presents the life and achievements of the person. It's meant to be interesting and informative, so it contains a lot of facts. You can find articles about people in newspapers, magazines, websites, etc. As a formal piece of writing, we use passive forms, connectors, and full forms. Also, we use past tenses to talk about the person's life, but we can use present tenses for how his or her achievements are seen today. An article about a famous person usually includes title, introduction, body paragraphs, conclusion. An introduction which introduces the persons and tells readers why they are famous. A main body of 2 or 3 paragraphs. Here you can write about his or her early life and later life, with details and dates, achievements, and deaths in chronological order. You should pay attention to the following questions. First, what are you going to read it? Secondly, who is going to read it? And third, what should your writing be about? Fourth, how many words should you write? And last question is, what should you include in your writing? Linking words or word connectors. I use it to link large groups of words, phrases, and sentences. You can also use them to connect paragraphs to give them coherence. There are several types of connectors. Connectors of emphasis. For example, undoubtedly, indeed, obviously. Connectors of addition, such as additionally, and additional, furthermore, also, to. Connectors of contrast, unlike, nevertheless, on the other hand. Connectors of order, first, firstly, second, secondly, third, thirdly, finally, at this time. Connectors of result, as a result, as a consequence of, therefore. And also, there can be connectors of illustration. For example, for instance, such as, including. Connectors of comparison, similarly, equally, likewise, just as, just like. Connectors of summary, in conclusion, to summarize, altogether, in short, to sum up. Connectors of reason, because of, with this in mind, in fact. Connectors of condition, if, in that case. Connectors of concession, admittedly, all the same, up to a point. And last one, connectors of generalization. As a rule, for the most part, in general, generally. There are only several types of connectors. Today, we are going to work with some of the connectors, such as and, before, despite, while, because. Let's talk about the connector and. It's used to join two words, phrases, referring to things that are related in some way. For example, he's gone to get some fish and chips. The film starred Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. Secondly, and used to say that one action or event follows another. For example, sit down and tell me all about it. She picked up the kitten and put it in the box. He knocked on the door and went in. You will have to wait and see what happens. Thirdly, and used to say that something is caused by something else. For example, I missed supper and I'm starving. She fell downstairs and broke her leg. And use it when adding numbers. 6 and 4 is 10. Next connector is but. Use it to connect two statements or phrases when the second one adds something different or seems surprising after the first one. For example, it's an old car, but it's very reliable. They rushed to the hospital, but they were too late. We've invited the boss, but she may decide not to come. An expensive but extremely useful book. Has he got any experience? No, but he's keen to learn. Secondly, but use it to introduce a statement that explains why the thing you have mentioned didn't happen or isn't possible. For example, I'd like to go, but I'm too busy. They would have married sooner, but they had to wait for her divorce. Thirdly, but used after negative to emphasize that it is the second part of the sentence that is true. For example, he lied to the court not just once, but on several occasions. 4. Except, what can we do but sit and wait? I had no choice but to accept this challenge. The next connector is because. It's used when you are giving the reason for something. For example, we didn't enjoy the day because the weather was so awful. Why can't I go? Because you are not old enough. Hubert never experienced any fear, and this was partly because he wasn't particularly intelligent. Many exam candidates lose marks simply because they don't read the questions properly. I decided to go with them mainly because I had nothing better to do. Just because. Used to say that although one thing is true, it doesn't mean that something else is true. For example, just because you are my brother doesn't mean I have to like you. Despite. Use it to say that something happens or is true even though something else might have prevented. The synonym of despite is in spite of. For example, despite all our efforts to save the school, the authorities decided to close it. Despite the fact that she went to Spain despite the fact that her doctor had told her to rest. Despite yourself. If you do something despite yourself, you do it although you didn't intend to. For example, Liz realized that, despite herself, she cared about Edward. The next connector is while. During the time that something is happening. For example, they arrived while we were having dinner. While she was asleep, thieves broke in and stole her handbag. She met Andy while working on a production of Carmen. Secondly, all the time that something is happening, would you look after the children while I do the shopping? The next connector is before. Earlier than a particular event or action. Say goodbye before you go. I saw her a few days before she died. Secondly, we use before so that something doesn't or cannot happen. Put that money somewhere safe before it gets stolen. That dog ought to be destroyed before it attacks any more children. Before I could say anything more, Holmes had rushed off towards the station. Thirdly, before used to say that something happens after a period of time. It was several minutes before we realized what was happening. It will be a while before we know the results. Fourth, use it to say that something must happen in order for something else to be possible. You have to pass the test before you can get a license. 5. Use it to warn someone that something bad will happen to them if they do not do something. Get out before I call the police. 6. Use to emphasize that someone doesn't want to do something. She will die before she will admit she was wrong. Now, let's practice to use connectors. Complete the sentences with a suitable connector. Please make a pause and fulfill the exercise. Now, you can check your answers. Over to you. Your task is to write an article about a famous person, 120-180 words. Include when and where he/she was born, his/her achievements, when he/she died. Don't forget to give your opinion. Use a plan to write your article.